So, I need to talk about the fact that Book Talk has collectively decided we're all okay psychologically after reading the most deranged books imaginable. Because why are people recommending emotional warfare with a cute little 5-star caption? There's no trigger warnings, no emotional preparation, just book changed. Yeah, I'm now a different person. I swear, some of you recommend books like cursed artifacts. Like, 1 minute, I'm literally reading peacefully in bed thinking, this is going to be a little dark. Maybe a little dark romance, psychological thriller, maybe. And then suddenly, I'm sitting upright at 2:13 a.m. whispering, what the actual fuck is happening right now? And the worst part, the actual worst part, the person who recommended it is always in the comments being just like, hee hee, just wait until you read chapter 27. Dude, why are you smiling? So today, we're talking about the books that emotionally violated moi. Books that made me stare out loud. Books that made me question humanity. And the books that were so disturbing, I genuinely considered reporting the author to the authorities. Let's ruin our mental health together today. Welcome back to the Litdulterous Whore, the podcast where I read books that emotionally destroyed me so you don't have to. Today, we are talking about books that mess me up psychologically. We're not talking cute little cry books. I'm talking books that made me stare at the wall. Books that made me question humanity. Books that made me need a shower moments after finishing them. Books that made me side-eye the person who recommended it. And honestly, some of you belong on a watch list for your recommendations. So grab your emotional support beverage and let's spiral together. Okay. First, we need to talk about Tender is the Flesh because this book did not gently ruin my mental health. It hit me like a folding chair. And the very worst part is I went in blind like an idiot because Book Talk kept recommending it with these vague little captions like, this book changed me. What? This book made me sick. What? Best dystopian horror ever. What? And I was like, okay, intellectual horror queen moment. Let me see what everybody is talking about. That was a mistake. One very huge mistake. So, if you somehow don't know, the premise is basically this. Animals have suddenly become unsafe to eat. So, society decides that the logical solution must be cannibalism, which already insane. Absolutely insane. And here's the thing. I thought this was going to be one of those distant, metaphorical, literary dystopias. Like, ooh, capitalism is a symbol. Ooh, commentary on consumption. Ooh, society bad. No, this book said, what if we made you experience psychological damage personally? And at first, I'm reading it thinking, okay, this is very disturbing, but it's manageable. The writing is very cold. It's a tad clinical. It's really detached, which honestly, it makes it so much worse because nobody reacts emotionally to anything. The horror is treated like paperwork. Like, imagine the emotional vibe of a slaughterhouse mixed with corporate HR training. Yeah, that's this book. This book. And then suddenly, this book escalated so fast. There was a point, and if you read it, you know the point. There was a point where I physically put the book down and just stared at my wall. I'm talking silence. There were no thoughts in my head, just spiritual evacuation because the horror isn't even just gore. It's become the new normal. Yeah. And that's what got me. The way everybody just adapts, the way society just keeps functioning. The way language changes to make horrifying things sound acceptable. That is what made me nauseous. And book talk people recommended this like such a quick, fun read. What? Fun? Fun for who? A serial killer, maybe? And emotionally, this book messed me up because it made me think about how humans justify cruelty when the system suddenly normalizes it. Like, underneath all the horror and the shock value, the book is really asking you, as readers, as humans, how far are people willing to go if society tells them that this is normal? Which is terrifying because the answer is apparently very far. Very far. Now, do I think this book is genius or trauma porn? Honestly, I think it's genius with some trauma porn. Well, because the disturbing content actually serves the themes. It's not disturbing just to be edgy. Every single gross moment in this book is going to reinforce the dehumanization, the consumer culture, emotional detachment, industrialized violence, and unfortunately, that is what makes it as effective as all hell. The pacing also deserves some jail time because there's almost no emotional relief. There is not one single ounce of comfort. There's no warmth. There is no freaking hope. Just this constant creeping dread. And the atmosphere, filthy. Emotionally filthy. This book smells like fluorescent lighting and moral collapse. Like if a grocery store had depression. And that ending, oh my God, that ending. Look, if you're here for spoilers, I'm not going to give you spoilers. But I will say, I should have DNF'd it for my mental health. Because when I finished this book, I literally sat there like, wow, humanity was a mistake. And honestly, the fact that I'm still sitting here thinking about it months later means the author did something right. They set out to do exactly what they wanted to do. And that's the most annoying part because I can't even say it was bad. It was incredibly effective. Okay, we need to discuss the fact that Book Talk has completely lost its moral compass when it comes to dark books. Because some of y'all are out here recommending the most psychologically devastating books ever written with a little fairy emoji and Lana Del Rey audio playing in the background. I just can't, okay? I just can't. Like, this book ruined me. Ruined you how, Karen? Financially? Emotionally? Criminally? Be more specific. I need more details. And listen, I love dark books. Clearly. That's why I am here right now. I love horror. I love disturbing fiction. I love books that make me so uncomfortable, but in an intelligent way. But Book Talk has developed this weird culture where the most traumatizing a book is, the more people act like it automatically deserves literary genius status. People, I'm sorry, but not every disturbing book is that deep. Sometimes a book is just disturbing. That's it. That's the tweet. And there's a difference between this story explores trauma, violence, obsession, grief, corruption, power dynamics. What if everybody suffered for 400 pages and then died? Those are very, very different things. And some authors right now absolutely feel like they're writing for shock clicks. Like they're sitting there going, okay, but how do I make Book Talk scream? No. How do I tell a meaningful story? And you can literally feel the difference. Because dark fiction, good dark fiction, leaves you thinking. Really good dark fiction has you wanting. Bad dark fiction just leaves you exhausted. Like, let's talk about some Book Talk books specifically. First, Haunting Adeline. Look, before you come at me, just listen. Now, this book has Book Talk in a virtual chokehold. Every recommendation video is always like, he's morally grey. Morally grey? That man is morally charcoal. And this is where things get weird online because Book Talk has started to romanticize this level of toxicity. And I, honestly, am starting to feel a little concerned. Like people aren't even saying, this is fictional and chaotic and entertaining. They're talking about these men like relationship goals. Babe, he's committed felonies. Multiple. And this is my thing. Look, I don't care if people enjoy toxic fictional characters. I do too. I'm not immune. The problem is when somebody can't separate fantasy from reality anymore. Hold up. I'm not done. Like, if your fictional man stalks you, he breaks into your house, he manipulates you psychologically, threatens people constantly. This is not a cinnamon roll. This is an FBI investigation. And Book Talk edits will still put romantic music over these like, where do I find a man like this? Honey, you'll find them in prison. Then there's Credence. Oh my God, this book gave me a migraine. I'm sorry. What was happening there? Every single time I think I understand the plot, somebody then explains another part and I lose consciousness mentally. And the thing is, book talk recommendations never prepare you correctly for the carnage that they are inviting into your lives. People will be like, this book is spicy. Spicy? Spicy? This word has lost all its meaning. At this point, spicy could mean one kissing scene or full psychological warfare in a cabin. And there's no consistency anymore. And then we have books like The Ritual. I'm sorry if this is one of your favorites. The entire Dark Academia Secret Society torture Olympic genre, which honestly fascinates me because book talk loves aesthetic suffering. Listen, if the trauma happens to come with candlelight, expensive suits, Latin phrases, dark libraries, orchestra music, people suddenly stop asking questions. Hey, I'm not saying I'm not guilty of this. I'm totally guilty of this. I see one velvet blazer and suddenly I'm like, well, maybe this cult isn't so bad. But aesthetically pleasing abuse is still abuse. And that's where the line between edgy and meaningful gets blurry online, because sometimes readers have this tendency to confuse being shocked with being intellectually challenged. Those are not the same thing. A book screaming horrible things at you for 500 pages isn't automatically profound. Are we learning anything today? And honestly, sometimes I think book talk rewards extremity over quality nowadays. Like, the goal is no longer this was beautifully written. Now it's this made me dissociate. When did we end up here? How did we end up here? Hey, but was it good though? Because there are books that can balance the disturbing content with incredible storytelling. I don't keep meaning to kick this book, but Tender as the Flesh was amazing. Labthonia, Earthlings. Those are the kinds of books that are disturbing for a reason. The horror supports the themes. They're saying something about the society you currently live in. They talk about alienation, violence, conformity, survival. They talk about humanity. Meanwhile, some books feel like the author just discovered AO3 and chaos simultaneously. And can we please talk about trigger warnings for just one bloody second? Because book talk will recommend the most emotionally violent books imaginable with absolutely no bloody context. It's like, hey, just go in blind. I would like to survive the experience, actually. Try again, book talk. I'm not saying books need to be sanitized. Absolutely not. But, and this is a big but, if your book contains graphic abuse, assault, self-harm, torture, extreme violence, maybe don't market it like a cozy beach read. That's what I'm saying. And the craziest part is, the darker the book is, the more competitive people get. Like, people are collecting trauma books like Pokemon cards. You thought that was disturbing? That's why. Why are we escalating psychologically as a community? Why is this a competitive sport now? Honestly, I think the reason dark books explode online is because people want to feel something intense. And when dark fiction is done well, it absolutely can be so powerful. It can force you to confront uncomfortable truths. It can literally challenge you emotionally. It can stay with you forever. And when it's done badly, it just feels exploitative, like emotional clickbait. And unfortunately, book talk sometimes rewards both equally, which is not only terrifying, but also I will still absolutely read the next unhinged recommendation someone gives me. You should send help because apparently I have learned nothing. This is the part where the vibe changes just a little because disturbing books are one thing. Shock is so easy. Gore is so easy. Chaos, even easier. But the books that actually haunt me, ooh, those are different. Those are the books that sneak into your brain quietly. The ones that keep you thinking about weeks later. You know, when you're washing the dishes, folding laundry, or maybe trying to go to sleep. The book where it's not really the violence that gets you. No, no. It's the emotional realism. And honestly, horror isn't what scares me anymore. It's the realism. It's reading something and realizing, oh my God, someone like this probably really exists out there. Or worse, under the wrong circumstances, maybe anybody could become this. That scares me. And one book talk book that will absolutely haunt me to my dying day, My Dark Vanessa. And before anybody says anything, I know this book is controversial. This is exactly what I mean when I say psychological realism is more terrifying than horror in some instances. Because, guys, there are no monsters in this book. There is no supernatural evil to vanquish. There's no apocalypse. There's no serial killer in your basement. No. It's manipulation. Slow, careful, psychological manipulation. And that is what made it so hard to read. Because this book doesn't present trauma in this dramatic movie kind of way. It presents it in the way it often actually really happens, with confusion, messily, with a ton of denial, with just a touch of justification, the shame, mirrored with the longing. And the reason this book haunted me is because Vanessa spends so much of her time in the story trying to convince herself that what happened to her was love. And there were scenes in this book where I physically had to stop reading because the emotional realism was too accurate. Yeah, it wasn't graphic. There was nothing shocking. It was just accurate. Like watching somebody slowly build a prison inside of their own minds. And that stuck with me because I think one of the scariest things in the world is how badly humans want meaning, even in really harmful situations, especially in harmful situations. And this horrible book, captures that obsession perfectly. The need to believe it mattered. It was special. It meant something. Even when deep down you know something was off, something was broken. And that emotionally wrecked me. Because the scariest books are the ones where you understand why the characters did it. Not because you agree, not because it's okay, but because the emotional logic makes sense. And once you understand someone, it becomes harder to separate yourself from them completely. Now, that to me, that's horror. It's not the monsters. It's not the monsters one little book. It's recognition. And another book that absolutely stayed under my skin was A Little Life. Ugh. Which honestly, I don't even know how to talk about. I really don't. I don't know how to talk about this book without sounding emotionally unstable because this book feels less like reading and more like surviving somebody else's pain for 700 goddamn pages. And I know people debate this book constantly online. Some people think it was a masterpiece. Some people think it's trauma porn. And honestly, I actually see both sides of this argument. And there are scenes in this book that I genuinely cannot forget. Not because they were graphic, though, you know what, some of them really are, but because the grief feels suffocatingly human. The loneliness, the self hatred, the way trauma changes how somebody sees themselves on a more permanent level. And that's what got to me. And there's this helpless feeling while reading it because you keep wanting the character to heal, to believe they deserve healing. And watching somebody unable to escape their own pain, ugh, it's devastating. Like, at some point, I stopped reading for the plot and I started reading out of serious emotional concern, which sounds insane because these are fictional people. But that is how immersive this book felt. And that is the difference between a disturbing book and a haunting book. Okay? A disturbing book shocks you temporarily. A haunting book emotionally moves into your house. Okay. And then there's Earthlings. This book. This book genuinely made me feel massively untethered from reality by the end of it. Because underneath all the bizarre, disturbing moments, it's really about alienation, about people who feel fundamentally disconnected from society. And what haunted me personally wasn't even the ending, it was a desperation. The feeling of, I do not belong in this world and I never will. That feeling, that's universal. And that's why it works. Because even if the story becomes extreme, the emotions underneath, that's recognizable. And honestly, I think that's why BookTok books explode emotionally online. People aren't reacting to the shock alone. They're literally reacting to the things they recognize in their own life. Grief, isolation, obsession, shame, loneliness, powerlessness. The horror is emotional before it's physical. And I think books that stay with us the longest are the ones that expose something uncomfortable but true about being a human, which is why I can forget plot twists. I can forget the gore. I can forget shock scenes, but I never forget emotional realism. That's the stuff that follows you home. Okay, we've been emotionally devastated long enough. It's time for some rapid fire chaos. This section is for the mentally unstable readers, the people whose TBRs look like evidence in a criminal investigation. I asked myself, what categories perfectly describe the book talk reading experience right now? And honestly, answers are deeply concerning. So let's begin. Books that should come with a therapist. First up, A Little Life. Obviously, at this point, this book should legally arrive with tissues, antidepressants, and a licensed professional asking if you're okay. Because why is this book emotionally longer than the Bible? I swear every chapter was like, you thought things were improving? Oh, it's adorable. Okay, another one. No Longer Human. Talk romanticizes this book so much. And I'm like, bossies, this is not a vibe. This is clinical depression. People post aesthetic edits about it. Well, I'm sitting there, generally concerned for everybody involved. And then the bell jar. Oh my God. A masterpiece. Absolutely incredible. But reading it feels like somebody's slowly dimming the lights inside your brain. Next, characters I would physically fight. First of all, everybody in Verity. Every single person in that book needs supervised counseling and a straitjacket. And don't even get me started on that manuscript. I was reading that thing like, go, what are you talking about? Also, Zaid from Haunting Adeline, book talk. Can call him hot all day long. That man is one hoodie away from a true crime documentary. Another one, The Men in Credence. You know, actually, no, I don't actually want to explain that one. If you know, you know. And if you don't know, continue protecting your peace. Authors who have scared me personally. Sayaka Murata, respectively. What the frick is happening in your brain? Because every time I think I understand where her books are going, she suddenly drives directly into psychological chaos at 120 miles per hour. And somehow it works. Otessa Mosh Beg. Because she does this thing where she writes characters that feel spiritually sticky. Like every character she creates looks like they smell faintly of expired yogurt and bad decisions. And somehow I can't stop reading. Obviously, Hanya Yanagihara. Man, who the hell hurt you? Because there is suffering. And then there's whatever emotional demolition project happened in A Little Life. Now, books I loved but can never reread. The Song of Achilles. Oh my God. This book was absolutely beautiful. It absolutely destroyed me. I will never emotionally recover, and I refuse to experience that ending ever again. Oh, another The Poppy War. So this series starts like magic school, fantasy, and then suddenly there's war crimes. The emotional whiplash nearly killed me. And honestly, Tender as the Flesh, phenomenal book, amazing commentary. Never reading that shit again. The Most Toxic Fictional Men Award. Oh, this category is stacked. Book Talk has created an entire economy around emotionally dangerous men. The nominees are Zaid Meadows from Haunting Adeline, Aaron Warner from Shatter Me, Rhysand from A Court of Thorn and Roses, and honestly, every man written with shadow powers, emotional trauma, and poor communication skills. TikTok sees one morally questionable man in black clothing and immediately loses all survival instincts. And look, I'm not judging because unfortunately, I'm the same. Books that smelled emotionally expensive. Look, you know those books where everybody is miserable, but aesthetically, look, the characters are depressed in cashmere. That's this category. If we were villains, this book smells like rain, old libraries, cigarettes, and unresolved bisexual tension. Also, The Secret History, the blueprint for rich people making catastrophic decisions academically. Everybody in that book needed therapy, sunlight, less access to philosophy. And finally, Fable, emotionally devastating, academically gorgeous, felt like getting hit in the face with a beautifully written brick. Looked up books that made me say, what the hell am I reading? Things have gotten worse since we last spoke. This book felt like opening cursed emails. Every page made me physically recoil. And then I finished it and immediately needed to discuss it with somebody because misery loves company. Also, Lapvona. This book medically dehydrated me. Everyone's dirty. Everyone's suffering. There's no joy anywhere. And somehow Book Talk was like, masterpiece, which is fair, but also terrifying. Honestly, Book Talk has changed reading culture for better and worse. Because on one hand, people are reading more. People are discovering weird books. People are passionate again. On the other hand, some of y'all are recommending psychological warfare recreationally. And I respect that. But I'm also afraid of all of us. Honestly, after this episode, I'm a little concerned about all of us. Because why are we voluntarily reading books that emotionally body slam us for entertainment? Why are we out here saying things like, this book destroyed me, and then immediately recommending it to 6 other people? That's not a reading community anymore. That's trauma distribution. But genuinely, I want to know, what's the book that disturbed you the most? Not just gross, not just shocking. I mean the book that stayed with you. The one that made you stare at the ceiling afterwards. The one that changed your brain. The one that changed your brain chemistry a little. The book that made you go, wow, I should not have experienced this emotionally. Because apparently we all enjoy suffering here. And honestly, some of my favorite reads have come from people aggressively warning me not to read something. The more somebody says this book ruined my life, the more I immediately like, okay, I'm going to add this to cart though. So leave your most unhinged recommendations, your saddest books, your scariest books, your psychologically devastated masterpieces. And if you recommend something that ruins my life, I will absolutely read it probably at 2 a.m. Probably while ignoring my responsibilities and probably while live texting somebody. Why would you tell me to read this? Also, if you enjoyed this episode, follow me everywhere at Litdulterous. Come yell at me on TikTok. Come argue with me about morally questionable fictional men. Come send me books that require emotional recovery time. And if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, rate this show because apparently the algorithm can also enjoy chaos. Share this episode with emotionally unstable readers. You know the ones. The people whose favorite genre is beautifully written psychological damage. And seriously, thank you for listening. I love that this weird little community exists, even if all of us collectively need therapy after our TBRs. And remember, your TBR is not safe here. See you in the next spiral. I hope that you have the reading week you deserve, and I will see you next week. Take care, readers.